I'm worried that my relationship with my father will be desolate, will not exist anymore.
It was one of those moments that didn't just pass it, pierce through the silence, and stayed like a shadow. It's impossible to forget. Kody Brown, red-faced and storming through the hallway, wasn't the man the cameras once tried to paint as the composed father of a plural family. No, this was raw, unfiltered Kody slamming the door so hard that the house itself seemed to flinch. The echo of that door wasn't just sound, it was a warning shot. And then came his voice, slicing through. The tension like broken glass. "Aurora," he shouted, not like a worried father, but like a man at war. It wasn't affection. It wasn't even anger in its purest form. It was desperation laced with fear. The howl of a man losing control and knowing it. But the silence that followed, that was louder, that was stronger. Aurora didn't shrink back. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She just stood there, unshaken, her stillness louder than any rage that filled the air. Kody's fury ricocheted off the walls, but it never touched her. That calm, that quiet defiance shattered him. And in the corner, Robin stood paralyzed, torn between the man she defended so fiercely and the daughter whose strength now terrified them both. Her eyes flicked between them, her mouth parted but frozen, as if even she had lost the script. This wasn't just another tense moment in the Brown household. This was collapse, implosion, years of quiet tension exploding into one brutal standoff. Aurora had spent years walking on eggshells, trying not to upset the fragile balance Kody demanded. But something broke in her, quietly, powerfully. She had carried the weight of silence for too long, and now she was done. There was no screaming, no begging, just truth, and Kody couldn't handle it. Because for all his posturing, for all the control he thought he held, his authority was crumbling, and he could feel it slipping like sand through his fingers. And the truth is, Robin saw it too. She had spent years defending Kody, patching holes in their image, hiding the growing chaos, but now the cracks were everywhere. Her face pale, her hands trembling, she was barely keeping herself upright. There's more happening behind those walls than the public sees. Mortgage payments are being missed. TLC money, once steady, now barely covers the essentials. Robin is the one juggling it all in secrets, stretching every dollar, hiding overdue bills, pretending everything is fine for Kody's fragile ego. But she's unraveling. And Kody, blinded by rage and pride, doesn't even realize they're sinking. That hallway confrontation wasn't random, it was years in the making. A lifetime of expectations and suppressed emotions boiling over in a moment of brutal honesty. Kody's face, red and wild, told the whole story. He wasn't just angry, he was terrified. Terrified that the people he once controlled, especially Robin's children, were no longer willing to be silent. Aurora looked him dead in the eyes and refused to budge. Kate, no tears, no yelling, just an unmovable presence that brought him to his knees without a single word. And Kody, he spiraled. He paced, shouted, waved his arms, grasping for the dominance that used to come so easily, but it was gone. That moment marked the end of it. For Robin, the pain was different. You could see it in the way she clutched her hands, the way her breath shook. She was trapped between her loyalty to the man she chose and the daughter who now stood like a mirror, reflecting all the damage they'd tried to cover up. Robin wasn't just witnessing a fight, she was watching everything fall apart. The weight of all the lies, the debt, the emotional games, it was finally too much. She had tried to protect Kody, shield the family from collapse, but now it was all spilling out in real time. And Aurora, she was done playing the role of the obedient daughter. Wasn't rebellion, it was survival. Aurora had grown up in a house where keeping quiet meant keeping peace. But the price of that peace had been her voice, and now she wanted it back. She had watched her mother break herself trying to hold Kody's world together. She had watched her siblings tiptoe around his moods, but that day, in that hallway, she refused to keep pretending. And that shook Kody more than any protest ever could. Because this wasn't the world he thought he ruled anymore. It had changed Dan. He was no longer
as like a very like present dad, like with his children. So
she moved instinctively, her hand reaching for Kody like a reflex burned into her after years of trying to keep him grounded. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was desperation, maybe just the ghost of who she used to be before all of this shattered around her. But even as her hand brushed his sleeve, her eyes never left Aurora, because Robin knew. She felt it down to her bones. Her daughter wasn't just stepping out the door. She was stepping out of reach, emotionally, spiritually, permanently. And the most painful part? Kody didn't even realize what he had just thrown away. He looked right into his daughter's eyes, full of silent heartbreak, and said the words that would haunt Robin forever. "If you can't respect me, don't come back." The air was sucked out of the room. Robin's breath caught in her throat, her lips parted as if she could take the words back on his behalf. But she was too late. Aurora turned. No drama, no scream, no goodbye. Just a door opening, and then silence. Silence so loud it rang through the walls. Robin's knees gave slightly, and for a split second, she looked like a woman falling in slow motion. After Aurora walked out, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It was quiet, but not the kind that brings peace. It was the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest and doesn't let you breathe. Robin stood motionless in the middle of the living room, staring at the front door like it might open again. It didn't. Kody didn't chase her. He didn't even say her name again. He just slumped down onto the couch like he was the one who had been wronged, like he was some martyr who had given everything and received nothing. But he hadn't given everything. All he had clung to was his pride. And now, with Aurora gone, that pride was the only thing he had left, and it meant nothing. Days dragged by, heavy and slow. Robin started pacing late at night, her footsteps, a soft, restless rhythm echoing through the house. She wasn't sleeping. She'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling while Kody, now permanently stationed on the couch, snored as if none of it mattered. He said he needed space to think, but he wasn't thinking, he was hiding. From the guilt, from the mirror, from the reality of what he'd done. The man who once demanded absolute loyalty couldn't even look his own family in the eye. Tension seeped into every corner of the house. Bills arrived, piling up like a silent threat. Robin began tucking them away in drawers, beneath cushions, in corners no one looked. She was trying to keep the illusion going. This illusion of family, of stability, of a home that hadn't already fallen apart. Kody didn't ask about the bills. He didn't ask about Aurora. He barely spoke at all. His pride was bleeding, and instead of healing, he was retreating. Robin watched it all in real time, the emotional withdrawal, the detachment, the way he looked right through her like she was just another piece of the furniture. She begged him to sit down and face the truth, to talk, to fix something, anything. But he didn't want to fix anything. He wanted to be right. Even if it meant losing everything. Aurora, meanwhile, was healing, quietly but powerfully. She wasn't lost in grief or rage. She wasn't acting out. She was moving forward. She met up with Micah Crestine's nephew, someone who had never lived under Kody's rule. Someone who listened, not because he had to, but because he cared. Micah didn't interrupt or offer advice or play devil's advocate. He just sat there and let her speak. And when Aurora spoke, something in her lifted, the weight of years, the silence she had been drowning in. Micah reminded her that choosing peace wasn't betrayal, that standing up for herself wasn't rebellion, that the love she needed was never conditional. And for the first time in months, Aurora smiled, really smiled. Robin saw the photo later on social media, a shot someone had taken at a local cafe. Aurora, her face open and relaxed, sitting across from Micah, laughing at something simple and beautiful, and Robin's heart cracked open. She didn't recognize her own daughter, not because Aurora had changed, but because this version of her was free from fear, from guilt, from the constant performance of pleasing a man who only saw respect as submission. Robin sat with that photo for hours, staring at her daughter's face, realizing she'd missed the moment Aurora began to disappear. She'd been so busy defending Kody, so consumed by the need to hold the family together, that she hadn't noticed the cost. And now, even though Aurora was only a few miles away, she felt like a stranger. A stranger Robin had once cradled as a baby, now out of reach. The breakdown didn't come with screaming. Robin had screamed too much already. This time, it came in the softest, most heartbreaking form: sit-down interview with TLC. Cameras rolling, lights glaring, and Robin, eyes glassy, hands trembling, voice barely above a whisper. She was trying to keep it together, but then the sentence broke free from her mouth like it had been waiting years. We're broke. No theatrics. Number. Drama. Just truth. The kind of truth you can't edit out. It wasn't a storyline. It wasn't a ploy. Robin told the cameras that Kody hadn't paid the mortgage in months. That she'd been covering utilities, groceries, and credit cards with the scraps of what remained in her personal accounts. She hadn't just been protecting Kody, she'd been enabling him, shielding him from the truth, from the stress, from the collapse. She admitted that she begged him over and over to sit down, to look at the numbers, to plan, to face it together. But Kody always had a reason to deflect. He was too busy, too stressed, too proud. On camera, he laughed off financial questions. He painted a picture of control and composure, but Robin had been quietly covering the holes in the walls while everything fell apart behind him. And in that moment, she said what she hadn't allowed herself to say for years. That the man she married, the one who promised leadership, protection, and vision, was gone. And in his place stood a man obsessed with blame, desperate to point fingers at anyone but himself. Aurora, the other wives, the adult children. Everyone else was the enemy, but not him. Never him. Robin cried during the interview. Not loud sobs, but the kind of silent tears that feel like drowning. And she didn't cry for herself. She cried because she realized she'd helped build the lie. She'd propped up Kody's pride, fed his narrative, and silenced her own doubts. And all the while, the person who saw the truth first was her daughter. The same girl Kody screamed at. The same one he cast out. Aurora had looked at the chaos and said, "No more." She hadn't run away, she had walked away bravely and clearly when the adults still clung to fantasy. And that haunted Robin. Because her child had the courage to do what she hadn't. The fallout wasn't contained to the house. Whispers turned to conversation, and conversation turned to headlines. Aurora and Micah were spotted again, this time at a community event. Nothing flashy. Just two young adults smiling, sitting close, unbothered by the stares. But the photos went viral. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Aurora looked like someone who had found peace. And Micah, he looked grounded, calm, like a soft place for her to land. The world started asking questions. Not about Aurora's choices, but about Kody's. About the man who once preached unity. Fatherhood. Divine leadership now looking more and more like a ghost of his former self. The collapse wasn't hidden anymore. It was public. Robin saw it happening from inside the wreckage, and for once, she didn't rush to put out the fire. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe somewhere deep inside, she knew it was already over.
In this relationship,
Right.
But I'm to the point where I'm walking around flipping two birds because I am so sick and tired
but let's get
of
back-
being guilted.
The storm behind the walls was no longer silent. It erupted when Kody found out who Mika's father was, man who had never bowed to the myth of polygamy, who had publicly challenged the emotional damage it inflicted on women and children, That one connection sent Kody spiraling. To him, Aurora's relationship with Micah wasn't innocent. It wasn't love. It was war. It was betrayal wrapped in defiance, and it made his blood boil. In a heated outburst that shattered whatever calm was left in their home, Kody accused his daughter of aligning herself with his enemies, of being used, of making him look like a fool. He couldn't bring himself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, Aurora was finally choosing what made her feel emotionally safe, something she had never known under his roof. But Kody hadn't seen the worst yet. That came when Gabriel arrived, quiet, composed, and heavier with grief than anyone in that house was ready to face. Gabriel stood in the center of the wreckage and did something none of them expected. He looked his father in the eye and asked a question that sliced deeper than any scream ever could. "Do you even see what you've done?" The room stood still. Kody blinked, his jaw twitching. Gabriel didn't flinch. He spoke about Aurora not with blame, but with understanding. Spoke about how she had always tried to be the bridge, the peacemaker, the one who bent to keep the peace, Kody demanded. Until one day, she couldn't bend anymore. And then Gabriel said his brother's name, Garrison. The ache in that word was enough to pull the air from the room. Gabriel didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations. He told the truth. Kody's absence, his silence, his refusal to see the pain in his children's eyes had left more than scars, had left wounds that never closed. Kody tried to respond, but nothing he said landed. His old tactics, blame, deflection, pretending he was the victim no longer held any power. Gabriel didn't allow him to twist the truth. This wasn't the narrative Kody had spent years controlling. That illusion shattered in that moment. The misunderstood patriarch he once pretended to be stood exposed. His children weren't rebellious or confused. They were clear-eyed. And they were done pretending. What followed next was the final blow to his carefully crafted legacy. Janelle, Christine, Mary, for years, had been presented as the stable roots of a crumbling family tree. The loyal ones. The quiet supporters of a man who always seemed to want more than he was willing to give. But now their silence had ended. On screen, in raw, unfiltered interviews, each woman stepped forward with clarity that was decades in the making. Janelle didn't mince words. She didn't scream. Her voice was steady, exhausted, finished. He doesn't want a family, she said. He wants control. Her statement cut deeper than any insult because it came from knowing him at his core. Her eyes didn't hold rage anymore. They held resignation, a realization that the vision they once shared had long since been abandoned, not by her, but by him. Christine had a different kind of fire. Her freedom was visible. Her face, her posture, even her laugh it all felt lighter. But the fire returned when she spoke about her kids. You could see it flare when she said, "He punished me for having a voice." That single line became a rallying cry for women everywhere who had lived that same story behind closed doors. It wasn't just sister wives anymore, it was real. Life, it was the pain of being silenced, minimized, discarded, and Christine finally refused to stay quiet. And then there was Mary. For so long, she had been the one who clung to hope. The one who stayed long after the love had gone cold. But now, sitting across from Kody in a sterile, emotionally tense room, she spoke with a calm that stunned even. "The crew, you abandoned me long before I left." She didn't blink. She didn't shake. She didn't cry. She took her power back, not with volume, but with finality. That was the moment the audience saw her not as the desperate, lonely first wife, but as the woman who saw through the fog and finally chose herself. Off camera, the shift was even more seismic. Christine and Janelle were in active talks with TLC, not to rehash the past, but to build something new. Spin-off series. It's one that focused not on plural marriage, but on women healing, building, reclaiming their power. They weren't interested in living under a man's rule anymore. They were ready to show what life looked like when women chose peace over performance. It wasn't about polygamy. It was about recovery. The world watched as the so-called sister wives finally became sisters in truth. But it was Aurora who truly turned the tide. Her interview with People magazine dropped like a bomb. It wasn't planned as revenge. It wasn't even angry. It was real, painfully honest, brave. She spoke about what it meant to grow up in a family that looked perfect on the outside and felt hollow on the inside. About the constant pressure to protect Kody's ego. About the financial chaos Robyn tried to cover. About the emotional exhaustion of being the daughter who never got to just be a child. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't hide behind polite phrases. She called it what it was: neglect, control, fear, and fans rallied. Oh, with gossip. But with empathy. Thousands of viewers who had once watched the show for drama now saw the truth behind the edits. Aurora's voice cracked open a story that had long been buried beneath PR spin and staged scenes. Her courage gave others the permission to speak, and it left Kody more isolated than ever before. Robyn, too, began to drift away, not in anger, not in some explosive exit, but in silence, in exhaustion. The camera caught fewer and fewer glimpses of her. No dramatic farewell, no confrontation. Just an absence that spoke volumes. The woman who had once fought so hard to protect the man she loved now saw the truth. In his absence, the bills were still coming. Emotional weight hadn't lifted. Kay and her heart, once so invested in the fairy tale, had quietly begun to step away from the wreckage. And then came the final twist. A legal notice. Delivered to Kody's doorstep like a final judgment Peyton's lawyer had filed. It was no longer about disagreements and reality TV edits. It was court dates. Legal lines drawn in ink. Fans had suspected lawsuits brewing for months, but now it was real. Unavoidable, irrefutable. Kody's world collapsed in slow motion. He wasn't just losing his family. He was losing the image he had built for over a decade. That image of the strong, respected, misunderstood patriarch, the center of it all was gone. What remained was a man standing alone, surrounded by lawsuits, abandoned homes, fractured relationships, and a legacy in ruins. The silence he once demanded had become his own sentence. There was no grand finale, no closing scene that tied everything up in a neat bow. Just aftermath, just truth. And in that truth, the Brown family had finally broken free.